The 2-pounder gun, officially designated the QF 2-pounder and universally known as the pom-pom, was a 40mm British autocannon, used as an anti-aircraft gun by the Royal Navy. The name came from the sound that the original models make when firing. This QF 2-pounder was not the same gun as the Ordnance QF 2-pounder, used by the British Army as an anti-tank gun and a tank gun. They shared only the projectile weight of 2 pounds. Predecessors: Boer War and the Great War. QF 1-pounder. The first gun to be called a pom-pom was the 37mm Nordenfeldt Maxim QF 1-pounder, introduced during the Second Boer War, the smallest artillery piece of that war. It fired a shell 1 pound in weight accurately over a distance of 3,000 yards. The barrel was water-cooled, and the shells were belt-fed from a 25-round fabric bell. The Boers used them against the British, who, seeing their utility, had the design copied by Vickers, who were already producing Maxim guns. During the First World War, it was used in the trenches of the Western Front against aircraft. QF 1.5-pounder. The first naval pom-pom was the QF 1.5-PDR Mark I, a piece with a caliber of 37mm and a barrel 43 calibers long. This was trialled in the Arethusa-class light cruisers HMS Arethusa and Undaunted, but did not tend to full service, being replaced instead by a larger weapon, the QF 2-PDR Mark II. QF 2-pounder Mark II. The QF 2-pounder Mark II was essentially a scaled-up version of the QF 1-pounder Maxim gun produced by Vickers. It was a 40mm caliber gun with a water-cooled barrel and a Vickers Maxim mechanism. It was ordered in 1915 by the Royal Navy as an anti-aircraft weapon for ships of cruiser size and below. The original models fired from hand-loaded fabric belts, although these were later replaced by steel link belts. This scaling-up process was not entirely successful, as it left the mechanism rather light and prone to faults such as rounds falling out of the belts. In 1918, one example of this weapon was experimentally mounted on the upper envelope of His Majesty's Airship 23R. Surviving weapons were brought out of storage to see service in World War II, mainly on board ships such as naval trawlers, motorboats and armed yachts. It was used almost exclusively in the single-barrel, unpowered pedestal mountings P Mark II, except for a small number of weapons on the mounting Mark 15, which was a twin-barreled, powered mount. These were too heavy to be of any use at sea, and were therefore mounted ashore. All were scrapped by 1944. Caliber 40mm L 39. Total length 96 inches. Length of bore 62 inches. Rifling pillar groove plane section 54.84 inches. Uniform twist 1 in 30-inch 12 grooves. Weight of gun and amp breech assembly 527 pound. Shell weight 2 pounds. Rate of fire 200 revolutions per minute. Effective range 1,200 yards. Muzzle velocity 1,920 feet per second. Some 7,000 guns were made. The gun was also used by the Japanese as the 40mm 62 high Shiki. The Regia Marina also used it from the Great War throughout World War II, although it was superseded in the 1930s as a primary AA weapon on Italian warships by more modern guns such as the cannon mitragliera da 37/54. QF 2-pounder Mark 8. The Royal Navy had identified the need for a rapid-firing, multi-barreled close-range anti-aircraft weapon at an early stage. Design work for such a weapon began in 1923 based on the earlier Mark II, undoubtedly to utilize the enormous stocks of 2-pounder ammunition left over from the First World War. Lack of funding led to a convoluted and drawn-out design and trials history, and it was not until 1930 that these weapons began to enter service. Known as the QF 2-pounder Mark VIII, it is usually referred to as the multiple pom-pom. The initial mounting was the 11.8 to 17.35-ton 8-barreled mounting Mark V, suitable for ships of cruiser and aircraft carrier size upward. From 1935, the quadruple mounting Mark VII, essentially half a Mark V of I, entered service for ships of destroyer and cruiser size. These multiple gun mounts required 4 different guns and were nicknamed the Chicago Piano. The mount had 2 rows each of 2 or 4 guns. Guns were produced in both right and left hand and inner and outer, so that the feed and ejector mechanisms matched. Single-barreled mounts, the Mark VIII and Mark XVI, were also widely used, mainly in small escorts and coastal craft. The Mark XVI mounting was related to the twin-mounting Mark V for the Lycon 20mm cannon and the Boffin mounting for the Bofors 40mm gun. An interesting feature was the very large magazine, from 140 rounds per gun for the 8-barreled mount, to 56 rounds for the single mounts. This large ammunition capacity gave the 8-barreled mount the ability to fire continuously for 73 seconds without reloading. A high-velocity, 1.8-pound round was developed for the pom-pom just prior to World War II, which raised the new gun muzzle velocity from 2,040 feet per second to 2,400 feet per second. Many older mountings were modified with conversions kits to fire HV ammunition, while most newly manufactured mounts were factory-built to fire HV ammunition. A mount modified or designed for HV ammunition was given a ** designation. For example, a MKV mount modified for HV ammunition would be designated MKV*. The pom-pom and the U.S. Navy. The United States Navy also considered adopting the pom-pom gun prior to its entry into the Second World War, and conducted a series of trials between their own 1.1 gun, the U.S. Army 37mm gun, the Vickers 40mm pom-pom, and a Bofors 40mm. Among the machine guns under consideration were the Army's 37mm and the British Navy's 2-pounder, more commonly known as the pom-pom. The decision soon narrowed to a choice between the Bofors and the British gun. The British were anxious to have the gun adopted, and the fact that British aid would be readily available in initiating manufacture was put forward as an argument in favor of its selection. The 2-pounder, moreover, was giving a good account of itself on British ships. On the other hand, there was the distinct disadvantage that the gun was designed for cordite powder, and no manufacturing facilities for the production of this ammunition were available in the United States. Thorough study revealed that the gun could not be converted to take American powder. Another consideration was muzzle velocity. The pom-pom had a relatively low velocity, 2,350 feet per second as compared with 2,830 for the Bofors. The success of the pom-pom in action was more than offset by the proved qualities of the Bofors in the hands of a number of powers who were using it, and a bureau decided to join that group. Shortly after the Bureau's selection of the Bofors, British naval officials also decided to adopt the gun. Wartime use. An advanced weapon when introduced. By the outbreak of World War II, advances in aircraft would have made it obsolete but for the introduction of the high-velocity round and new Director designs. It was intended that the curtain of fire it threw up would be sufficient to deter attacking aircraft, which it did, but was hampered by the ineffective Mk3 director. The Mkiv director with a gyro rate unit and Type 282 radar was a great advance and was introduced on the King George V class battleships. In January 1941, HMS Illustris's Mk8 mountings performed flawlessly, firing 30,000 rounds with very few stoppages. When HMS Prince of Wales was attacked and sunk by Japanese aircraft near Singapore, the subsequent report judged that a single 40mm Bofors gun-firing tracer was a more effective anti-aircraft weapon than a multiple pom-pom in direct control, as the pom-poms did not have tracer ammunition and the pom-pom ammunition had deteriorated badly in its ready-use lockers, while the Type 282 radar units also failed in the equatorial heat. In the same action, the commissioned gunner of HMS Repulse spent the whole action running from one pom-pom mount to another trying to keep them operational due to the faulty ammunition. The pom-poms on Repulse shot down 2 of the 4 confirmed kills made by Force Z, while Prince of Wales's pom-poms did record hits on enemy aircraft. The Royal Navy judged the pom-poms' effectiveness to range from about half that of the Bofors per gun against torpedo planes to about equal against kamikaze attackers. It was a ubiquitous weapon that outnumbered the Bofors gun in Commonwealth naval service up to the end of World War II, and it shot down many Axis aircraft. Later innovations such as remote power control coupled to a radar-equipped tachymetric director increased the accuracy enormously, and problems with the fuses and reliability were also remedied. The single mountings received a reprieve toward the end of the war, as the 20mm Helicon guns had insufficient stopping power to counter Japanese kamikaze aircraft, and there were insufficient numbers of Bofors guns to meet demand. Caliber 40mm L39. Shell weight 2 pounder 1.8 pound for high-velocity round. Rate of fire 115 revolutions per minute, fully automatic. Effective range 3,800 yards or 5,000 yards HV. Effective ceiling 13,300 feet. Muzzle velocity 2,040 feet per second or 2,400 feet per second for HV. For more extensive technical data, see 2PDR marketed nav.com QF 2 pounder Mark 14. The QF 2 pounder Mark 14, or Rolls 2 pounder, was developed by Rolls-Royce as a competitor to the 40mm Vickers S gun as an aircraft weapon. The latter was the more successful design, and found some use as an anti-tank weapon. A reworked version was adopted by the Royal Navy as a weapon for motor gunboats, being adopted in the Fairmile C-type. It had a semi-automatic horizontally sliding breech block, and was shipped on a manually trained pedestal mount. The weapon was not a success, and of the 1,200 ordered, only some 600 were delivered. It was replaced by the Mullins 6-pounder gun, the British Army's Ordnance QF 6-pounder gun with an autoloader. Ammunition. Bibliography. Lewis Brown, A Radar History of World War II, Technical and Military Imperatives. Institute of Physics Publishing, 1999. ISBN 0-7503-06599. John Campbell, Naval Weapons of World War II. Naval Institute Press, 1986. ISBN 978-087-021-4592. Rowland and Boyd, U.S. Navy Bureau of Ordnance in World War II, U.S. and Bureau of Ordnance. Gartsky and Dulin, Battleships, Allied Battleships of World War II. Naval Institute Press, 1980. ISBN 978087021-100-3. IV Hogan Amp, LF. Thurston, British Artillery Weapons and Ammunition 1914–1918. London, Ian Allen, 1972. Martin Middlebrook and Patrick Mahoney, Battleship, The Loss of the Prince of Wales and the Repulse. Penguin Classic Military History, 2001. ISBN 9780141391199. Alan Raven and John Roberts, British Cruisers of World War II. Naval Institute Press, 1980. ISBN 978087021-9221.